Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first of three Get Hired boot camps. Today's session is on resumes, cover letters, and your online presence. My name is Liam Rosses-Givens. I'm one of the associate directors, and I am joined by Samantha Karpolov. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Liam. Hi, everyone. I am Samantha Karpolov, the career specialist at our Dobbs Ferry campus, and looking forward to presenting today.
Great. Now, to be able to get your certification for this workshop series, you do have to watch all three. So you do have the opportunity to watch some of these sessions after the fact, after they have already begun and have already happened. But you do have until July 7th to watch all three. And make sure at the end that you take our survey. At the end of this, there will be a QR link and a link in the bio for you to kind of take a look at, be able to get to the survey, and to confirm that you would watch the presentation in order for you to be counted toward. So I'm now going to pass it off to Samantha, and she's going to get underway with the presentation.
Thanks, Liam. We're going to start by talking about resumes, just going into an overview of what a resume is. Jump into that first slide.
My fault. I forgot I was.
No worries. So what is a resume? So it's your primary marketing document, and it's the first impression that an employer or recruiter will have of you. Generally, you're going to want to keep your resume to one page. That's what our Mercy format will suggest. And that's because you want to make it quick and easy for an employer to gather what all of your experience is. As it says here also, it's a quick, easy to scan document. They're really only going to be looking at your resume for 7 seconds on average. So the goal is to have you get the interview. You want to put your best self out there and give a strong professional first impression, but it's really a means to an end to help you land that interview where you can explain more about your experiences and your qualifications. And so, as this slide also says, it's a document summarizing your experience, skill sets, and qualifications. This can include work experience, volunteer, activities, leadership. You'll see we'll go into more detail about all those sections shortly. And you're also going to be showcasing your skill sets through short, high-impact statements and streamlined lists. We'll show some examples of what that looks like shortly. But first, we'll start with talking about your heading on your resume. So this is an example of what your heading should look like, again, according to our Mercy format. And really, it's very straightforward. You're going to include your first and last name, full first and last name, and then only your city and state for where you live. You don't need to have your full address on there, just for safety reasons. Your city and state is enough, as well as your phone number. So this should be the daytime number you can be reached at, and you should also include a customized voicemail greeting. So not just the standard greeting that's on your phone when you first purchase it or get it. It should be something along the lines of, "Hi, you've reached so-and-so, unavailable to take your call right now, but if you leave your name and number, I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you." And that just shows that you're kind of taking that extra step to do that. Plus, an employer will know that they've reached you instead of just a random number. So make sure to do that as well. It just takes a couple minutes. You're also going to want to include a professional email address. So your Mercy email is fine to use, but if you choose to use a personal email address like a Gmail, make sure it's professional, just your first and last name, nothing crazy or anything like that. And then something else to note is that if you have a LinkedIn account, you should definitely include your profile URL and make sure to customize that URL with just either your first and last name or the first initial of your first name and your last name. And one more item of note, actually, that is not on here, but sometimes you'll see, for those of you who are in the School of Liberal Arts, you might have a portfolio that you created to showcase your work. And so that's great to create that and add that URL up here as well, to show all of your work curated in one spot, and just make sure to keep it clean and professional. We can go into that later. Thank you. And so now on to education. So your education section is the first section after your heading. Generally, that should be at the top. And you're going to want to follow the formatting that we put forth here in terms of bolding Mercy College, including the location as Dobbs Ferry, New York, even if you take classes mainly at another campus. This is the campus that confers degrees, so that should be listed on there. And then the name of your degree, so whether it's a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts, and the major that you're taking following that, all in italics below. And then the year that you are expected to graduate, if your graduation has yet to come up, or the year that you did graduate should be listed there. If you graduated this past May 2021, just May 2021 is all you need. You don't need that word expected. With your GPA, we recommend only including it if it's a 3.0 or above, and make sure not to round. And then the last section you see under education is relevant courses. So these are classes that are related to your major, and it shouldn't be anything that's an intro class or a 100 like English 101 or anything like that. Make sure it's related to your major. And generally, you'll probably be adding these classes closer to the end of your college career. But this is a great way to get those keywords on your resume and also show that you know your stuff. Or maybe you have a different major compared to classes that you are pursuing. You want to make sure that you get those words on there. A couple other things as well that aren't featured in this sample, but you can also include these in an education section. Include if you're in the honors program at Mercy, if you're on the dean's list, sometimes you'll see those show up here as well. But you can create an honors and awards section that's separate for that too. Okay, on to experience. So as I mentioned, there are different types of experiences that you can feature on your resume. And this example shows internships and jobs, part-time jobs. You can also show a section for volunteer work. That's definitely a fair section to add, and you might call that volunteer experience. So there are different ways to feature experience. You're going to want to follow the same formatting as you saw in education, where the company name is bolded, and then just the city and state follow, not bolded. Underneath that is your job title in italics. So for this person, they were an intern, they just put that in italics underneath. And on the other side, on the right, is the date range in which they were involved in that activity. So your month and year is all you need, the month and year you started and the month and year you finished. You're always going to be listing your experiences in reverse chronological order, which I'll get to in a second. But as you'll notice with this person, their internship was most recent, so that's listed first. It finished in December 2018, and then their counselor jobs were not as recent, so those are listed underneath. Next, please. All right, so what to include? I mentioned some of this a little bit already, but just to recap, you can include jobs, internships, and volunteer experience in your experience section. And like I said, sometimes you'll see those sections, or the experience section will be divided up in a little bit of a different way. So you can have related experience, additional experience, volunteer experience, work experience, depending on what you're trying to show, will determine what you should title each section. And you're just going to want to make sure it's relevant to the job that you're applying for. Otherwise, it's a separate section. So you're always going to list positions in reverse chronological order, like I said. And really, that's to show that you're currently working. If you have a job that you're currently working in, instead of adding an end date, it's going to just be present or current that you'll put in that position. You're always going to include a space between positions of at different organizations, and no space between positions at the same organization. And then you're going to use related experiences and additional experiences, like I said, to highlight things that are relevant. And that might be a little bit further back in your work history, but you can kind of highlight those and bring those to the top. Alrighty, and so with regards to bullet points, sorry. So with regards to bullet points, these are really, really key to make sure that you're being specific enough and show your skills. This is really how a recruiter will understand what you did at a job and how it relates to the job you're applying to. You're using them to describe your experiences. They shouldn't be paragraphs or full sentences. They should start with a strong action verb that demonstrates the skill that you used. And you should write them in first person, but don't use pronouns like I or me. Make sure that your bullet points are using the appropriate tense. So for current positions, you're writing create or identify instead of created or identified for positions that you have had in the past. And then you're going to end your bullet points either with or without periods. Either way, just make sure to be consistent. Alrighty, so on to leadership activities and volunteering. I've mentioned this a little bit already, but this is another great section to include because it can, again, really highlight that you have those skills that employers are looking for. Leadership definitely is one of them. And so you're going to, again, follow the same format that you saw in the experience section with bolding company names, italicizing job titles. You're going to include bullet points if you can. Definitely, if you have the space on a one-page resume, include bullet points to describe more detail of what you did. But it's also fine to just list these. You can just list everything on one line if you're able to fit it on there, if you need to save space. There are also other space-saving alternatives. If you're pushing one page and it's going on to two, again, generally you want to stick to one page, so you can play around with the margins a little bit, use a smaller text size, not too small, maybe size 11 would probably be the best. You should definitely single space your resume to make sure you're saving space that way. And like I said, you can list not jobs, but definitely leadership and activities can be listed without bullet points if need be. Alrighty, and so now on to skills. So you'll notice that the sample that we have here at the top there only lists hard skills, which are computer skills and language skills, as well as technical skills. You'll have a separate section for that if you're, let's say, a computer science major or majoring in cybersecurity, and you know a lot of different programming languages, and you want to make sure that you capture all the operating systems and software that you know. There are subsections for that within a technical skills section, and that in its own is its own section. So definitely make sure to include that if that's your major. But for most majors, your skills section just includes computer and language skills, no soft skills like teamwork or leadership. Those are subjective, and computer and language skills can be assessed. For example, if in an interview, a recruiter or an interviewer is asking you to translate something into Spanish right in front of them, or to do the interview in Spanish. That's how they can tell how well you know Spanish, if you're fluent or not. So make sure to be truthful on your resume in general, but especially specify how well you know certain languages, how well you know certain software, computer programs, by indicating level of proficiency, as you see there. Something else to note is that you can include other sections within skills that are technical, or I guess hard skills. You can sometimes include social media, underneath computer, you might say social media platforms, list those. That can be helpful for if you're a communications major and so forth, if you'll be using that in your internship or job. And then if you're in the healthcare field or pursuing nursing, you're definitely going to want to list your certifications. Now, this sample shows a certification section, which is definitely fine to format it that way, but you can also include certifications as one of those kind of subsections, just like computer and language skills, and just list them there. Definitely make sure to include those. I think they're pretty standard for if you're, for example, becoming a nurse. But if you have anything that can help you stand out and look different from the crowd, then definitely include that. All right, so some resume don'ts. So you don't want to include an objective on your resume. If you applied to a position, it's very obvious because you're applying that you want that job. So there's no need to include an objective. It's an outdated practice. You'll have an opportunity to talk about yourself more and why you're the right person for that role in the interview and in your cover letter. So just make sure to not include an objective. You also don't want to let your resume exceed one page, as I've said already. You don't use tiny font to try to squish everything on one page. I think we've said before that even Jeff Bezos has a one-page resume. So if he can do that, then you students definitely can. And the way to best get to that is not only using those space-saving alternatives I spoke of, but to tailor it and only include relevant experiences for the jobs you're applying to. You're going to want to make sure that you are using a font that is easy to read. So we generally say that Calibri and Times New Roman and Cambria even are fine fonts to use, but nothing crazy like Curls MT. Again, it's a quick, easy to scan document, so don't make it difficult for a recruiter to read your information. You don't want to use unconventional formatting or symbols. It can get distracting. The same goes for bright colors. You don't need to have your photo on there. And with that in mind, you don't want to use templates that you see online or on Microsoft Word. You want to create your resume from scratch using the samples we have on our website. You don't use full sentences when writing your bullet points. You want to keep things short and sweet. Don't include an unprofessional email address, from the get-go. That already kind of makes you look bad. You want to just have something straightforward, your first and last name, and numbers if necessary. Don't use I or me in writing your bullet points. You can still write in first person, just don't include those pronouns. And make sure to use the correct verb tense. So again, if you are writing about a position that you're currently pursuing or currently involved in, use present tense. Don't overload your resume with jargon. You, again, want to be straightforward and clear. This is not a time to use slang or anything like that. Be straightforward and clear. You don't want to use elaborate designs like I mentioned. Any patterns or colors, just not welcome here. Just keep it straightforward. Don't list your hobbies either. It's nice to know that you like to go snowboarding on the weekends, or you love going to vacation in a certain place. But let that be small talk when you're talking and meeting your interviewer. Don't add that on your resume. Just keep it professional. Now, if there's some kind of club you've been a part of, or some organization that you join that is unique and might kind of sound like a hobby, that's probably fine to include on there. But again, you want to probably just speak with your career coach about what makes sense for you. Don't include any unnecessary personal information like marital status, religion, social security number. That will set you up for discrimination. So don't include that on your resume. Sometimes with government resumes, which are kind of its own animal in itself, they will ask you to add a social security number, but you're just going to want to always go back to the job description and make sure you're including everything that is shown there, the keywords, and if they ask for something specific, then include that on your resume. And then finally, you're not going to include references. See this all the time. References available upon request at the very bottom of someone's resume. Not something that you need to mention. It's implied because in a lot of applications you'll be submitting, there will be a section for you to upload references and their information. And if there's not, then you should definitely create a page of references on just listing their phone number and email and job title and where they work. And that will definitely suffice. So resume resources, I've been alluding to our formats. This is where you can find them on our website, career.mercy.edu. These are our guidebooks, and they are pretty long-winded, but hopefully, by going to our samples and reviewing, just like we did just now, the different sections of a resume from all the samples that we show, it can help you understand how to craft a good one. And then we also have some Word document templates, I guess you could say, that you can start your resume from. However, once again, don't go into Microsoft Word and choose a resume template to work off of. A career coach won't approve that, and that is required in order to apply to jobs on Handshake. So we include sample, sorry, Liam, a couple more things before we jump to the next thing. We include sample resume formats, like I said, sample verbs that you can use to start your bullet points, sample bullet points themselves that for typical jobs that students have that you can even copy and paste and put on your own resume as long as you're being truthful. And then we have, as you see here, career community specific resumes for each of those majors that is involved with specific communities. So make sure to give these a look when you get a chance. All right, now on to cover letters. So along with the resume information we have in those guidebooks, we also have sample cover letters and information about how to write a strong cover letter. So a cover letter is another marketing document that you'll be using to demonstrate your experiences in greater detail. And a great cover letter accomplishes the following. It identifies the exact position you're applying for, including a requisition number as needed. Sometimes that job ID number will be listed in the job posting. So you're going to want to be specific and include that if it's there. And really, the reason that you state this right off the bat is to let the recruiter know where you found out about them. So that's important to include. It also summarizes your strengths and experiences that are relevant to the job description. And we'll get into more detail about that in just a second. It gives examples of how and when you developed or demonstrated those particular skills. And it helps the hiring manager understand how this position fits into your short and long-term career plan. So essentially what you might be understanding from these pieces of advice is that you're telling your story. Tell us and tell the recruiter what makes you unique and different. Talk about your transferable skills. Talk about what makes you stand out. Talk about how you connect to the mission of the company you're applying for, and just make the connections between everything that you're saying clear. How are you groomed for the job that you're applying to? And a cover letter will also alleviate any concerns or red flags that someone might have when they're reading your resume. So for example, gaps in employment, that has been very popular with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this is an opportunity to explain yourself in a way that your resume doesn't necessarily provide for. You also don't want to overshare information. So this is not a place to, once again, talk about your marital status, talk about your religion, none of that. No confidential details. You're going to want to avoid subjects that will protect you from discrimination. So just keep that in mind. And the last thing really to know about cover letters is that you're always going to want to write one where there's a place to submit one. So maybe you really want a specific internship and you add a cover letter as page 2 of your resume. That's being too forceful. If there's not an opportunity to upload a cover letter, submit your application that way. However, whenever there is a cover letter option on an application, it will say optional, but for you, that should be required. You're going to want to make the extra effort to showcase your skills in a way that maybe others won't. They won't take the time to write that letter, but you're always going to want to do that when you can. Alrighty, so yes, as we've talked about a little bit already, you're going to want to write a new cover letter every time. That means not writing a general cover letter, but tailoring it, just like with your resume, to the jobs or the internships that you're applying to. The best way to do that is, once again, to just always go back to the job description, identify the key responsibilities that you would be doing if you got that job, the key traits, skills, etc. And think about examples from your work experience or volunteer, or whatever it might be, that you can use and talk about that apply to that role specifically. You're going to tell your story. This is about storytelling. Really, that's what draws the recruiter in and makes them interested, what makes you unique and different and special. Why should we hire you for this job when so many other applicants have applied and are competing for this role? What makes you different? And then again, don't overshare. You don't want to say too much, but you do always just want to keep it professional. And again, go back to the job description. So we have samples in our guidebooks that you just saw on our website as well. And you can take a look at those and read further about what makes for a strong cover letter and how to write a good one. We definitely suggest that you send your cover letters to a career coach before you submit your applications, because you always want to get a second set of eyes when it comes to these things. So just a quick sample cover letter so that you can get an idea of what you'll be writing about in each paragraph and how it should be structured. So first, you're going to have your first and last name and your contact info at the top. This can also just be your heading from your resume. You can just add that as another page in a separate document and use the same thing. Then you're going to add the date and make sure this is the date that you submit your application, not just the date that you write your letter. It might be a different date, so make sure to update that. You're also going to include the employer's information. So this is really key. The contact name, if you know it. Sometimes you won't know the direct person who will be reading your letter, and that's fine. That's the majority of the time. But if you do know their name, make sure to add that, add their title as well. If you know their department, that's great. But the general information you should absolutely include is the company's name, street address, city, state, and zip code. And then underneath that is the greeting line. So, dear hiring manager. Most of the time, that's the greeting line that you'll be using. And once again, unless you know who will be reading your letter for certain, don't include a name. Don't go to the company's website and say, oh, it looks like this HR manager would probably be hiring me. I'm going to put their name down there. It would look unprofessional if you guess. So just say hiring manager if you're not sure. So on to what you're including in each paragraph. We're going to start with paragraph 1. This is to help clarify what role you're applying for and grab the reader's attention. Once again, tell them where you found the role and tell them the title of the role. Make an introductory statement about why you would be a good fit for this position and why it interests you, again, helping you kind of separate yourself from the crowd. And you may choose to explain why you were attracted to this particular organization or position, and why you're seeking this now. You might also take the opportunity to point out why your specific background in your classes, your skills, your work experience makes you a good candidate. But there will be more opportunity to do that in the next couple of paragraphs. So just keep this brief for the most part. And then if there's someone specific who referred you to the role, you're going to want to make sure to mention them. Just call them out in this paragraph. Sometimes a position requires something specific or unusual. So if that's the case, again, based on what the job description says, whether it's like a relocation or having certain availability at different hours, just make sure to acknowledge it here. This is also the spot where you would call out, again, those red flags about gaps in your resume, for example, and make sure just to address that. So you're kind of just setting up the stage for what you're about to talk about. So there can be more than 3 paragraphs for a cover letter. Sometimes you'll see 4. It's really not a set rule. I think it's nice to have 2 middle paragraphs and then a closing paragraph, so 4 in total, because those 2 middle paragraphs will describe different experiences and how they relate to the job you're applying to. That's really what you're doing here. You're going to indicate what you can do for the employer based on their needs. Don't restate your resume here. You're not describing everything you've ever done, but instead taking the time to find the key things that are essential to the job, and again, that you possess, in order to address those, and not everything on your resume. So not talking about every job you've had, every activity, every club, just the key things. You're referring to specific skills and traits outlined in the job description. Make sure to give examples. Don't just say, I have this skill. It's much more powerful and meaningful to say how you have that skill based on something that you did. So for example, you know how to work well with people because of your X number of years as a customer service rep at a certain company, or you have knowledge of how to teach students because of your experience as a TA or a tutor. Give some more detail and some more meat around the things that you've already started to show on your resume. And then if you have qualifications that aren't noted on your resume, this is definitely the opportunity to talk about them in these paragraphs. A resume, again, you're keeping it to 1 page. You're not going to be able to say everything likely. So go into a little bit more detail here about things that are relevant to the job that you might have not said. And then finally, in your 3rd paragraph, you're closing things up, you're wrapping it up. You're going to want to take the opportunity to explain what attracted you to this role if you haven't already in paragraph 1. Again, maybe it's the mission statement from the company, or it's the fact that they have a lot of press about something that you're really interested in right now. There's a certain initiative, and this will show that you have done your research, you've done your homework on the company by looking at their website and reading in order to understand what really they're all about and how you're connected to what they do. You're also going to demonstrate some, like I said, research beyond the job description and show your enthusiastic interest. So make sure that comes across too. You want to show that you're passionate about this, even if you might not be super excited about pursuing an internship that might be second on your list. You still want to show that you're enthusiastic, because that will definitely come across. And then you're just going to refer them to your resume, kind of some standard sentences from there. Requesting additional materials. Maybe they are asking for a portfolio or references in their application, just point out those. And finally, you're going to let them know that you would appreciate the opportunity for an interview. So you're not asking point blank for an interview to schedule it right then, but rather kind of alluding to that you would hope to discuss these things further in an interview. And of course, thank them. Make sure to thank them. That's super important. And then finally, you're ending with sincerely and your name typed. No need to handwrite or your signature and then scan it. Just type your name. And this is what ultimately you will attach to your applications.
Great, thank you, Sam. All right, so we're going to take a quick little break from the cover letters and resumes, and we'll quickly go back to talk about ATS and JobScan and kind of how those relate to your resume. But I do want to take some time to talk a little bit about your online presence and what it actually means, and why you should be online and what you should be doing while you're online. Now, I just quickly want to start to say we're not going to go over a full LinkedIn profile right now. We do have a series coming up in this July called Dive into LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is going to be extremely important for you to use while you're on a job search. It's going to be a great place for you to have a whole profile. It's a great job board. It's a great place for you to, keep your network all together. It's the modern day Rolodex. But we're not going to go too deep into that because we do have a great workshop series coming down the line about that. But I do want to make some quick mentions about where recruiters are looking for people and what you can be doing now. 59% of job seekers use social media to research companies, which is huge. So they look up the company names on Instagram, on Facebook, they look on LinkedIn's. As I said, LinkedIn is extremely important. 87% of recruiters are on there. 80% of recruiters find LinkedIn the most effective because they vet candidates there, they post job theirs, and 90% of recruiters are using social media. So what this tells us is that it's extremely important. Jobs are being posted on LinkedIn. Companies are utilizing Instagram. This is a great way to interact. Something to really you need to be mindful about is what you look like online. So you will want to have a completed full and great LinkedIn profile. But you also want to make sure that you make it that so your social media accounts that aren't professional aren't easy to find. So your Instagram, it might need to be private. Your Twitter, it might need to be private. If you're in a field like media studies and you run kind of like your business, your freelancing business through your Instagram, then that would be something you want to promote and to showcase your work. If you write blogs and you're interested in becoming a writer or a journalist and you want to showcase your work, that's something that you need to be doing, is posting your work onto some type of social media. But you have to make sure you have a good balance. Keep your public facing social media where it can be seen, and your private social media, you want to keep that private and make sure it can't be easily searched. This even goes to the email address that you pick to put on your resume. You want to make sure that email address isn't linked to any form of social media that you don't want seen, because you never know what an employer is going to deem as inappropriate. As kind of an anecdotal story, I had a student who lost an internship offer because in his photo he had a picture of himself at a wedding holding a cocktail. That student was 22 years old, but it didn't matter. The company still declined him because of that photo, and he wasn't at a party or anything crazy like that. He was clearly at a wedding. So you want to make sure you be very careful about what can be easily accessed from your social media positions. So there's also, if you look kind of towards the bottom of these stats, a 40% gap in positions that were filled versus posted. That means a lot of positions are being filled through networking. And you can do a lot of networking through LinkedIn. You can meet a lot of different people. So some positions aren't even getting up into some job boards like Handshake or Indeed, or even posted on LinkedIn before they find the candidate that they want. So networking is going to be extremely important for you. And again, that's all more the reason to create a LinkedIn profile and to join us at our next series. So as I said, make sure you decide which profiles you want to be professional and which ones you want to make private. It's going to be really important, but utilizing social media can help you. It can help you look for jobs and help showcase some of the work if you have those online portfolios, or if you have a GitHub you want to showcase, or if you have a blog that you want to be seen. So be sure to be using it effectively. And that's something that you can talk to a career coach about, how you can be using social media to help you a little bit more. If you really don't have work to showcase, like if you're not in a technical field, or you're not in a field that shows projects, you just want to be mindful of what you post on social media, and then even the security settings you have on your social media accounts while you look for a position. Because you never know what an employer is going to deem inappropriate. So you just want to make sure those are pretty locked down. And all of these stats were acquired from JobVite, from their Recruiter Annual Social Recruiting Survey. All right, before I move on, I know we've given a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions at this time? You can throw them in the chat if you do. All right, for now, I'm going to go right to the next slide then. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about application tracking systems. 90% of large companies actually use these to vet candidates. Basically, what this is a computer software that scans the document for keywords, phrases. It looks for exact matches, though, kind of the downside to this. So if you have a word that is similar to another word that's in their job description, you might want to take the time to change it. So because that computer system cannot recognize words that aren't exact matches. And the more exact matches you have, the higher score the ATS will give you, and the better chance that a real person is going to look over your resume. So this is something to really be mindful about when you're making your resume. Recruiters go over resumes quickly when they look at them, but a lot of the times the first scan, they're not even going to look at it. They're going to be looking at a whole batch of resumes that meet a score threshold that they want. Utilize the skills section. So if you look at a job description and you see required skills, if you have those skills, you have to make sure that they appear in your resume somewhere, just to help you, help you get those extra points. And write out in acronyms like CPA, Certified Public Accounting. You don't want to get too jargony, so you want to make sure everything's written out. That way, this computer system can find out exactly what you're looking for. And as always, use spell check. No one likes to see spelling errors. Even an ATS can't figure out what it is, but even a person doesn't like to see spelling errors on a resume. 75% of resumes are never even read by a human. So now we're gonna go into a little bit about some of the resources that we can use to help beat these problems. And one website that I like is JobScan. Now, this is going to be a great tool for you to look at your resume and then look at the job description and make the changes needed. You can upload your resume and upload the job right here on JobScan. It uses similar software to ATS, and it'll calculate your score. Now, once it calculates the score, it'll give you some tips about what you're missing and what you can add. Now, this is a free service for a couple of resumes a month. So you want to make sure that you're using it for only jobs that you're like really, really excited about, or just kind of way to keep practicing, but remember some of the things that it's going to teach you. It's going to really kind of go over where you need to add skills. If you're qualified for a job like this, what are you missing, and how you can start presenting some of that work. Okay, so more about JobScan. The match rate generated after plugging in resumes in the job description. So it'll range, it'll be a percentage, and you'll just want to make sure you have as high as a percentage as possible. It'll break it down by categories and teach you on how to improve. As I said, it'll kind of like go through each step. It allows up to 5 scans per month. You can pay if you want more, but I do suggest just using those 5 and just kind of getting on the tips. And then LinkedIn has a very similar feature as well. All right, so before we go, I just want to double check and see if anyone has any questions at all now that we're at the end. There is no one answering in the chat. Okay, so if you do have any questions, you can reach us at cpd@mercy.edu. I do recommend following us on our Instagram as well, which is at Mercy Careers. It's a good place to find out about events. And as always, you do want to be looking out for our emails from your community leaders. Now, for those of you who are watching this, if you're watching this to get the digital badge, you do want to make sure that you watch all 3 workshops. This is the first workshop. To access the survey, you can either use your phone, scan the QR link, or you have a form right here. So do make sure to get it counted. You do need to take that survey, and you have until July 6th to watch all 3 and take all 3 surveys. So for everything that you could potentially need, you can find all of our resources up at career.mercy.edu. You can find all of our past events there as well. So thank you everyone for coming today and joining with us. And as always, we're here if you need any help.